Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories as per usual. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes on this one. I think if everybody took just a quick second, we could get there. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. We are getting ever closer to my 2026 goal of 150,000, and I do also just want to say thank you so much for that. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, enjoy the 2 hours of horror stories with no mid-roll ads, except for the ad break after this intro. There will not be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I don't think I have had any privacy for a few weeks. I work for a third-party call center that operates out of a long shut-down department store in a walled-off section of a half-shuttered mall. The windows are all boarded up, and we have to use the metal doors in the back. We handle customer service for multiple businesses, so one minute I could be helping a woman reboot her Wi-Fi, and the second after the call ends, I mean that literally, I will be helping a man reschedule his refrigerator delivery. If there is one saving grace to this job, it's the variety. For many, though, that isn't enough to make up for the fact that we only get a 15-minute lunch and a cumulative 10-minute break time, including bathroom breaks. You want to make sure you use it because it can't be carried over to the next shift, but you get written up for going over the allotted break time. Turnover was so bad that experienced reps were spending more time training new reps than taking calls. Management started calling it a measurable loss of productivity. One coworker of mine, Sharon, sort of acts as our de facto HR. The branch can't even hold a legitimate HR employee, which should tell you a lot. Sharon's a middle-aged woman who used to work in social work, but this unfortunately paid better. A few weeks ago, she took it upon herself to fix the turnover problem. Her solution? A compliment jar where we write nice things about one another, and once a week, Sharon opens and reads them to everyone during the shift. She hoped that it would boost morale and get employees talking to one another outside the confines of work. Everyone groaned at the idea of another task to complete for the week, but she assured us that participation was encouraged but not at all mandatory. She just wanted everyone's hard work to be seen. At the end of the first week of her new experiment, Sharon gathered us all around and stood behind her desk. She reached her hand into the jar and pulled out the first folded up strip of paper and read it aloud. Tim is always patient with the assholes. I wasn't really sure who Tim was, and by the squeaking chairs and silence, I don't think many of us did. Someone finally broke the silence with a little clap. No one knew how to act after each compliment was read aloud, but in the end, we resorted to half-assed clapping between compliments like, "Alice makes the best coffee in the break room. Thank you, Emma, for fixing my headset. If you need to troubleshoot a TV, you can always count on Blake." People didn't really know how to act when their names were called either. Some stayed in their seats, others stood and gave an awkward wave to the crowd of colleagues. The whole thing seemed performative to me at the time, and I thought this would die out quickly. Sharon always took the jar home with her in the evening. A few days after the first reading, Sharon walked past my desk with the jar tucked under her arm. "Bill, how do you think this is going?" I looked around at the busy office, and then back to Sharon. "Well, no one is crying." She laughed. "I know all of this is corny," she said. "People are miserable here. We get screamed at for 8 hours. Then we go home and worry about the next day, wondering if anyone would notice if we didn't come back." "Management would notice." "Only if the call queue backs up." "You think this will fix that?" I asked as I pointed to the jar. There was no way in hell this office could keep that going. She shrugged. "Maybe it will get people to at least look at each other." By the next reading, I thought I was right when the first few were basically just praise for always being on time for work. It looked like the compliments were getting lazier. We had already run out of nice things to say to one another, and we were just grasping at straws to find something to add. Then there was, "If you think you're on a tough call, just look over at Josh." That one got a laugh out of me because Josh always seems stressed out of his mind. After that, more ended up being funny. Madison, I love how your chair squeaks in rhythm with the hold music when you need a little break on the line. Sharon seemed so proud because it seemed this initiative was actually going to take off. To her credit, it really did seem like the office was a brighter place. There were more conversations between people on their breaks, and just a lighter general mood in the office. Over the next week, I found some of the conversations at work to be extremely awkward, but it was better than before. Anything was better than nothing. On Wednesday, David came up to me while I was getting a cup of coffee that Alice had brewed for everyone. "Are you having to leave home earlier to get here on time?" I finished my sip, cleared my throat, and asked, "I'm sorry?" "I mean, with all that road work on Laurel Street, do you have to leave for work earlier?" Now I know I didn't tell him where I lived. I only knew his name was David because he had a tag with his name on his cubicle, but the road work 2 streets down did delay me, and it was extremely annoying. "Yeah, do you live around there too?" "No, just read about it in the paper." David was a strange guy. Maybe I had mentioned my street before. The third week, Sharon confidently announced the reading of all the compliments. As she unfolded the first sliver of paper, she paused, furrowed her brow, and then chuckled before reading. "I'm happy that Alice got her oil changed over the weekend. That sound was really starting to bother me." The regular clapping commenced as Sharon looked up at the crowd. "Is that an inside joke or something?" No one responded, so she continued. "Tim, your son really seemed to enjoy the clown at the birthday party last week." "Elizabeth, your stylist was so right to suggest that color. I am so happy you changed your mind in the chair." "Blue curtains were the way to go, Alex. Much better than the green, especially with that rug. We gotta talk about the new bedspread, though." Each one Sharon tried to laugh off. "I'm so happy that this has led to some after-hours friendships." Sharon pulled the next slip and hesitated as she skimmed it. She frowned as she stared at the slip, looked up at the crowd in disbelief, and then back at the paper in her hand. This one is just for me," she said. Annoyed sighs filled the room as she searched for the next compliment. When my name was called, I was jolted to attention. "Bill, I love how you are so careful when you water the tomatoes in your vegetable garden. I think spraying some cayenne pepper in water on it will work better than the chicken wire." My fingers became numb and my chest felt hollow. I have never spoken to anyone here about my garden, and I have never posted about it anywhere. At the end of the reading, as everyone was rolling or shuffling back to their cubicles, Sharon tried to raise her voice above the noise. "From now on, let's try to keep these workplace appropriate." On my way home, I checked the mirrors for anyone following me. I checked my fence for cameras or loose boards. Nothing. I monitored the jar this whole week, and I saw no one put in a compliment. But every morning, there are a few more in the jar. I wasn't the only one shaken by an intrusive message. The office has been quieter. People are hiding their phones and closing laptops as others walk by. There's less bathroom traffic, and people are taking fewer breaks than ever before. I even noticed a few people driving different cars to work than I remembered. It can't be just one person. I have my suspicions about a few. Of course, there was David. He knew where I lived somehow. Then there was Sharon. She always took the jar home with her. The only other weird conversation was with Ted, who told me that he thought peppers would grow better in my garden. When I asked if he was the one who left me the compliment, he laughed it off. "No, I just heard about the tomatoes, and I thought we were in more of a pepper climate. That's all." I tried to talk to Alice when I saw her at the vending machine, staring at the rows of snacks, deciding what was going to get her through the rest of the afternoon. "You know this isn't normal, right?" I said. She tapped her card on the machine and began to punch in her numbers. "The compliments," I continued. "You've heard it. The curtains, your oil change, my garden. People are following each other." Her snacks fell. As she bent down to retrieve it, she whispered, "Don't." "Don't what?" She stood up and looked at me, her eyes darting to mine and then past me and back. "Don't make people think I'm talking to you about this." "Alice? Please," she said. "Don't make it worse for me." That afternoon I caught Blake following me. I pulled into my driveway, parked, and got out of my car. He pulled in and then began to back up like he was just using it to turn around. I motioned for him to roll down his window and yelled, "Blake, what the hell?" He rolled down his window an inch as he pulled off and yelled, "I was just trying to find something nice to say." I was dumbfounded. Did he really think that was appropriate? The day before the next reading, I decided to write my first real compliment. I wanted to prove a point. I folded it and dropped it into the jar. "Blake," I wrote, "I love how determined you are to find compliments, even if you follow people home to do it." I thought it would be read, and everyone would understand how out of hand this has gotten. That night I got a call from Sharon. "Hello? Hey, Bill." She was keeping her voice low. "I know you're upset, but you can't start writing stuff like that." "Sharon, Blake followed me home. He said he just wanted to find something to put in the compliment jar. This has gotten out of hand. I'm trying to stop this." "That's what everyone says." "You need to stop this." After a few seconds of silence, Sharon said, "I want to, Bill, but the regional office won't let me. They want to implement jars in other locations. Productivity has spiked at our branch, and turnover is almost non-existent." "But, Bill, listen. I have the jar at my house, and I am screening all the slips. You got one." "And?" "It says, 'Bill, I love how you inspected your fence the other day. It's important to take pride in what we have.'" I can't remember the rest of the conversation. I just stopped listening to what I was hearing and prepared for the next day. I actually drafted this last night, talking about how I wasn't going to go to readings anymore just to avoid the whole thing. But I decided not to send it. I didn't want to give them anything for today's reading. This morning I walked into work, and everyone was already sitting, chairs pushed together in anticipation like they were pigs at a trough, smiles on their faces. Sharon began with, "I asked us to keep things workplace appropriate. I went through all of these last night. Other than a few complimenting others on their new cars, I can't read any of these." Some booed, and a few stood and shouted that she was censoring our positivity. Sharon argued for a bit with the crowd and began to step away from the desk. As she did, Madison pulled the jar from her and took Sharon's place. Sharon kept walking out the door. Madison began, "You were so brave deleting their number, Emma, even if you did end up putting it back in your phone later on." Josh practiced the best apology in his car before he went inside the apartment. "Madison, I think it is so sweet that you still sleep on your husband's side of the bed." "Oh, guys, that is so sweet. Thank you for thinking of me," she continued, and I was happy to see we were almost finished. Madison went to put the lid back on the jar. Oops, found a couple of stragglers. "Sharon, you were so brave to leave before we were finished. I love how much faith you have in your breaks." Silence. I noticed some people glancing towards the metal doors. Others looked around, taking note of who seemed most uncomfortable. "Okay, everyone, last one for the week," Madison said. "Bill, I love how you still think strangers can help, even when Sharon can't." Some laughed and cheered while others simply watched me. I'm not sure if all this time their cheers are for the recipient or for the writer. I'm back home from my shift. I saw a strip of paper caught in my chicken wire. I bent down and grabbed it. "Bill, I love how careful you are about locking your door. Most people forget the kitchen window." I looked up at my window and saw the blinds move. I ran inside to find Blake in my kitchen. He looked embarrassed, like I had caught him stealing copy paper again. "Get out of my house." He smiled and said, "Your voice carries so well." I stepped towards him, and he stepped towards the door. "Excellent posture," he said. "Very protective of your property." He slipped out the door. As he walked off, he looked over his shoulder and said, "See plenty of nice things to say." I can't decide what to do. I can't get a hold of Sharon. Her phone is going straight to voicemail now. And if anyone from work is here reading this, I guess I should add a compliment. Sharon, thank you for the compliment jar. I know you just wanted to help. Morale has never been higher. I'm probably one of the oldest Reddit users around. I enjoy reading stories on here, and after everything that's happened to me, I think it's finally time to share one of my own. I'm 72 years old now, and most of my life has been unusual. Whenever I've told people about the things I've experienced, they've either laughed or assumed old age had finally caught up with me. Maybe you'll think the same. At this point, I don't really care. This is what happened. Before I tell you about yesterday, I need to take you back nearly 50 years. I was 26 years old and happily married to my wife, Alice. She was 22 back then. After her grandmother passed away, Alice inherited her house in a small town several hours away from where we'd been living. They hadn't been particularly close, but the house had been left to her regardless. 6 months after her grandmother's death, we packed our belongings and moved in. It was a beautiful old house with a large backyard. She adored gardening and spent countless hours planting flowers. By the end of our first summer there, every corner of the yard was bursting with color. Every evening we'd curl up together on the couch or lie in bed talking about our future. I used to tell her that I'd still love her when she was old and wrinkled. She'd laugh and tell me she'd never leave me. Alice also loved knitting. One Saturday afternoon, she was sitting in her favorite armchair, carefully knitting a blue winter cap for our son. The funny thing was, she wasn't even pregnant, but she wanted a son so badly that she'd already started preparing for him. I remember watching her from across the room, smiling to myself. When the doorbell rang, I answered it. An elderly woman stood at the porch. She had silver hair, kind eyes, and a warm smile. For a moment, she simply stared at me. Then she introduced herself. Her name was Celia. She told me she'd been a close friend of Alice's grandmother. I invited her inside. Alice made tea, and before long the three of us were sitting around the kitchen table talking. Celia spoke fondly about the town, shared stories about Alice's grandmother, and seemed genuinely happy to meet us. Alice and Celia hit it off immediately. Both of them loved gardening. Celia spent nearly half an hour describing the flowers growing around her purple house, while Alice listened with complete fascination. To be honest, I was bored out of my mind. Still, it was nice seeing Alice so happy. When Celia left, she promised to visit again, and she did. A few days later, she came back carrying a homemade cake. Then she visited again the following week. Then again, and again. At first we thought she was simply lonely. She lived by herself after all, but as the weeks passed, her visits became more frequent. Occasionally she'd show up when we'd just gotten home from work, exhausted and wanting nothing more than a quiet evening alone. We never said anything. Neither of us wanted to hurt her feelings. Looking back now, I wish we had, because eventually things started to feel wrong. The first moment that truly unsettled me happened during one of Celia's visits. I don't even remember what she and Alice were talking about. I only remember the way they suddenly turned towards me at exactly the same moment, and smiled. The smiles were identical. Not similar. Identical. The same tilt of the head, the same expression. I told myself I was imagining things, but for some reason I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, Alice and I went into town to buy groceries. While we were picking out vegetables, we started chatting with one of the employees. The conversation eventually turned to local residents. Naturally, Celia's name came up. The woman immediately recognized it. "Oh, Celia?" she said. "She's lucky to be alive." When we asked what she meant, she told us that several months earlier, Celia had suffered a stroke right there in the middle of the store. According to her, everyone thought she was dead. Then suddenly she'd opened her eyes. "It was a miracle," the woman said. Alice mentioned that Celia had been friends with her grandmother. The employee frowned. "Really? That's what she told us." The woman shook her head. "That's strange. I've lived here my whole life. I don't remember them ever spending time together." The comment bothered me more than I cared to admit. When we returned home that afternoon, things became even stranger. The front door was standing open. My stomach dropped immediately. I've always scared easily. Alice, on the other hand, has never been afraid of much. She stepped onto the porch and shouted, "Who's in there?" No answer. Then, after a few seconds, someone emerged from the hallway. It was Celia. For some reason, seeing her standing inside our house didn't make me feel relieved. It made me feel worse. She smiled awkwardly and explained that she'd brought us a cake. The door had apparently been unlocked, so she'd let herself in. Alice and I always locked the door. Always. Still, mistakes happen. That's what we told ourselves. At the time, we accepted her explanation. 5 days later, something even more unsettling happened. It was late at night, and Alice and I were getting ready for bed. I was walking past the window when I glanced outside, and I saw someone standing behind the tree. I screamed before I even had time to think. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told Alice we should turn off the lights and pretend we hadn't seen anything at all. Like, if we stayed still enough, whatever it was outside might simply disappear. But Alice didn't listen. She went outside. She checked the yard, came back, and said there was no one there. We concluded it must have been a woman. There had been a shape, a silhouette that looked like a dress. It was hard to see clearly from the window, but there was definitely someone there, watching. 2 days later, on a rainy night, I saw someone again. I had left my jacket outside earlier in the day, and when the rain started, I went to grab it before it got soaked. As I was walking back inside, I saw her. Celia. This time, I wasn't scared. I was just irritated, and something in me was certain she had been the one behind the tree that night. I don't know how I knew, but I did. Alice invited her in like nothing had happened. She made tea, as usual. I stayed quiet most of the time, letting Alice do the talking. Celia explained that her memory had been getting worse lately, that sometimes she got confused and thought places were hers when they weren't. It sounded reasonable, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to stop coming to our house. On October 23rd, a tragedy happened. I'll never forget that day as long as I live. I was working my shift at the factory when one of my colleagues walked up to me. He looked unusually pale. He leaned in close and said quietly, "There was an explosion in the store your wife works in." My heart dropped immediately. When I arrived there, the entire place was gone. The store was torn apart. It didn't even look real. An officer stopped me from getting closer. I asked him if there were any survivors. He looked at me for a long moment before shaking his head. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "We found no survivors, but we did find a wedding ring on the ground. Do you recognize it?" He held it out. The moment I saw it, I knew. It was hers. I collapsed right there on my knees. I don't remember when I started crying, only that I couldn't stop. They said it was a gas leak, old pipes, and I knew it was true. I had seen the condition of that place before. I had known it wasn't safe, and yet I let Alice work there. That thought destroyed me more than anything else. For days, I didn't speak to anyone. And then one day, Celia started coming back. At first, I tried to push her away. I didn't want anyone there. I didn't want comfort, I didn't want anything, but she kept showing up. Slowly, she began helping without asking, cleaning the house, cooking small meals, even watering Alice's flowers in the backyard. We barely spoke, and yet she never commented on my silence, never pressured me, never acted like anything was strange about it at all. She just stayed, and I let her. As time went on, we started talking again, small conversations at first, then longer ones. I even remember laughing for the first time since Alice died, but no matter how normal things seemed on the surface, I always had the same feeling, that Celia was near me, watching, listening, even when she wasn't in the room. Then one day she told me her house had a cockroach infestation. She asked if she could stay at mine for a few nights. I hesitated, but after everything she had done for me during my worst days, how could I say no? One morning I woke up in bed and instinctively turned to the other side. I hadn't opened my eyes yet, but I felt it immediately. Someone lying next to me. For a split second my mind filled in the blank the only way it knew how. Alice. I smiled faintly, almost on reflex. I reached out and hugged her like I used to, pulling her close, holding on to that familiar comfort I thought I had lost forever. But something was wrong. Her skin didn't feel right. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't warm in the way I remembered. There was a texture to it that made my stomach tighten before my mind even caught up. I opened my eyes. Celia was lying beside me. She was staring right at me with a wide, satisfied smile. And I was staring back at her with pure hatred. Something in me snapped. I started yelling at her, telling her she had crossed every possible line, that this was not acceptable, that she needed to get out of my house immediately. Celia went downstairs, while I stayed in my room, trying to calm myself down. I hoped she had left. When I finally came downstairs, she was sitting in the living room waiting for me. The moment she saw me, tears began forming in her eyes. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. I did all of this to be with you again. Again? I asked. I'm your wife, Alice. For a moment I just stared at her. You died 5 years ago. She continued. I'm actually 68 years old now. You have no idea what losing you did to me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She wiped her eyes. Then one day I met a woman with red hair. She told me she could move a soul from one body to another. She said I could even choose a point in time to return to. I stood frozen. I chose this year, she said. Celia died of a heart attack. The moment she died, my soul was transferred into her body. I gave that woman everything I owned. Every last penny. I even gave her permission to kill me, if that was what it took. She laughed weakly through her tears. I thought she was a scammer. I thought she would just murder me and disappear with my money. But it worked. My life meant nothing without you, she whispered. So I took the chance. I shook my head. How do I know you're Alice? Because I know your secret. A knot formed in my stomach. When you were a little boy, you and your brother were playing in a barn. You found a box of matches. You started a fire by accident. Your brother died in that fire. I desperately searched for another explanation, but deep down I already knew. I had never told this story to anyone else. This is insane, I said. You really thought this was going to work? You're crazy. Tears streamed down her face. Don't you remember what you used to tell me when we lay in bed together? You told me you'd love me forever. Her voice cracked. You said you'd still love me when I was old and wrinkled. A chill crawled up my spine, not because the words were unfamiliar, but because they were exactly the same words I had told Alice. Something inside me screamed that I needed to leave. I turned and rushed toward the front door, but it was locked. I knew then that I needed to get somewhere safe. So I decided to run upstairs and lock myself in the bedroom. As I backed towards the stairs, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. That's when I saw Celia holding a knife. "Did you kill Alice?" I asked. Tears were already filling my eyes. My voice trembled so badly, I barely recognized it as my own. For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she shook her head. "I couldn't do it." I didn't know what that meant. She took a step toward me, then another. I turned and ran. My feet pounded against the stairs as I raced upward. Behind me, I heard her following. Then, I heard her falling down the stairs. I stopped and turned around. Celia was lying at the bottom of the staircase. She wasn't moving. For several seconds, I could only stare. Then my mind started racing. The pieces suddenly seemed to fit together. If Celia truly was Alice from the future, then she must have somehow removed my Alice from the picture. She must have kidnapped her. Maybe even arranged the explosion at the store to make everyone believe she was dead. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to look. Earlier, Celia had often talked about her house, the purple one with the beautiful garden. I didn't know the exact address, but I knew the neighborhood, so I searched until I found it. I used the keys I had taken from Celia's body. I was calling for Alice, and then finally, I heard her voice coming from the bathroom. I unlocked the door, and there she was. Alice. We just stared at each other, then we both started crying. I wrapped my arms around her and held her tighter than I had ever held anyone before. I couldn't believe it. Once we had both calmed down, I told Alice everything. When I finished, she took a deep breath and told me what had happened on the day of the explosion. "I got to the store early that morning," she said. "You know how I always liked arriving before everyone else. I wanted a few quiet minutes to drink my coffee before work." I nodded. Celia was waiting outside. She told me she had a problem with a faucet in her bathroom and needed help turning it off. Since I had plenty of time before my shift started, I agreed to help. The moment I got inside, everything changed. She locked me in the bathroom. I screamed, I kicked the door, I tried everything I could think of, but I couldn't get out. There weren't any windows, no way to signal anyone outside. Tears formed in her eyes. We sat together for hours, talking, crying, filling in the gaps left by all those lost days. I should have felt complete. I should have felt like my nightmare was finally over, but I didn't. No matter how much I loved Alice, there was one thought I couldn't escape. The woman who had done those things, who had kidnapped her, who had manipulated me, watched me, lied to me, and nearly killed me, was Alice. Maybe not this Alice, but she was still a version of her. Every time I looked at her, a small part of me wondered what she might become one day. Eventually, I made a decision. I ended our marriage. 10 years passed after those events. I remarried. My wife's name was Eleanor, and together we had a son named Walt. We lived in a different city, far away from that town and everything that had happened there. I found a new job, built a new life. During all those years, I never saw Alice again. One afternoon, Eleanor came home from grocery shopping with Walt. "Look what I got," he shouted. He proudly held up a blue winter cap. My stomach dropped. I couldn't stop staring at it. The color, the pattern, the stitching. I knew that hat. 10 years ago, I had watched Alice sit in her favorite armchair and knit that exact same cap for a son she didn't even have yet. "Where did you get that?" I asked. Eleanor smiled. "We met a sweet old lady while shopping. She seemed lonely. We talked for a while. She told me she never had children of her own." Eleanor looked at the hat. She had this with her and insisted that Walt should have it. That night, I finally told Eleanor everything about Alice. For years, I had kept the story to myself because I knew how insane it sounded. And Eleanor reacted exactly how I expected. She didn't believe a word of it. We argued for hours. By the time we went to bed, neither of us were speaking to each other. I understood why she was angry, but she had to know. For nearly 2 hours, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. What if it really was Alice? What if she had found us? How was I supposed to protect my wife and son? Then I heard it. The front door opened. I immediately woke Eleanor. Someone's in the house. I told her to stay upstairs and lock the bedroom door, but she refused. Instead, she followed me. Together we walked downstairs. Then a light clicked on, and there she was. An old woman stood in our living room. She was holding a knife. At first glance, I knew she wasn't Celia. This was a different face. The woman tilted her head. "Hello, my love. We haven't seen each other in a very long time. For me, much longer than for you." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The old woman took a step forward. "You can probably guess how I got here. After you left me, I had no one. I spent years alone. Decades, actually. Every day I thought about you. I thought about revenge many times. Then I turned 68. One day I met the red-haired woman. I gave her my soul and decided it was time for my revenge." Her grip tightened around the knife. "Now you will suffer exactly as I did." When she finished speaking, we heard Walt crying at the top of the stairs. Neither of us had even noticed he had left his bedroom. He stood there frozen, staring at Alice, at the knife in her hand and listening to everything she had just confessed. Then Alice started walking toward us. We turned and ran for the stairs. That's when it happened again, like déjà vu. I heard our footsteps pounding the steps, Alice behind us, and then I heard her falling down the stairs. Just like last time, it ended the same way. After everything went quiet, Eleanor and I sat together for a long time trying to understand what to do about Alice. Somewhere out there, in the correct version of our timeline, she still existed. What if she came back again? Eleanor wanted to make sure she never could. She said the only safe option was to remove her entirely, but I couldn't accept that. If we did that, we wouldn't be any different from her. So I suggested something else. We would go to her, not to confront her, but to help her. Over the years, we kept in contact with Alice. She became part of our lives in a way none of us had expected. We helped her through what she was going through, and somehow she helped us too, and eventually we became friends. Then when we grew old, Alice moved away and we eventually lost contact. That brings me to yesterday. I'm 72 now. Eleanor passed away a year ago, and I live in the same house we once shared. It was an ordinary morning. I made coffee, sat down, and watched television. Then the doorbell rang. I was surprised because I don't really get visitors anymore. When I opened the door, I saw her. Alice. She was 68 now, but this time she was fully herself. For a moment, I didn't know what I felt more, happiness or fear. Everything we had lived through came back at once. The stairs, the knife, the screaming, the impossible version of her that should have never existed. But I let her in anyway. I ordered her coffee. At first, I felt uneasy, but slowly the tension faded. We talked about where life had taken us, about everything that happened over the years we haven't seen each other. Eventually, we left the house and I walked her to her hotel. As we crossed the road, I noticed a woman with red hair standing on the corner. She looked at us. For a brief second, her expression hardened. And then she smiled. In that moment, I knew. If things had gone differently, she would have been the one to take Alice's soul. But this time, nothing happened. I run a paranormal blog. Yeah, I know. I started it after my ex-husband died. I needed somewhere to put all the noise in my head, I guess. And it helped. Mostly I debunk things. I try to give people closure. Doesn't always work. In my experience, most ghosts are just bad pipes. Demons are usually raccoons or whatever. So when people started messaging me about Lucent Lake, I didn't immediately pack a bag. The rumors talked about a killer, a slasher, or something. Didn't raise any red flags for me, but then people started sending screenshots from local Facebook groups and sad and angry posts from relatives. 4 people had died in 3 weeks. Something felt off, so I guess I took the hook. Nobody had seen anyone. No footprints, no weapon, no suspect. The police kept saying it might be an animal, but you could feel nobody believed that. They were just saying stuff in the cameras so people wouldn't panic or something. Lucent Lake is a nice place. Picnic tables, trails, teenagers hiding beer, couples posing on the old dock like it wasn't half rotted. Normal place. Safe enough. When I got there, the place was empty. The woods felt completely abandoned. I got there after dark. Yeah, I know. But I knew the area. And I couldn't exactly tell my boss I had to leave early because people online were saying there was an invisible slasher. And yeah, to be honest, I knew it would be good for the blog. The road was narrow and annoying. Every branch in my headlights looked like a hand or something. Every shadow looked like a person. Great, Liv. Very professional. About a mile from the lake, there was this half-assed barricade across the road. 2 rangers stood next to it, or at least they were dressed like rangers. The man came over first. Older guy, gray beard, big jacket, and already looking disappointed in me before I'd even rolled down the window. Park, Dad. Park Dad leaned toward the window. Road's closed. Yeah, I saw. Then turn around. I was hoping to just take a look. No. Okay, warm guy. He did not love that. The woman ranger came over then. She was maybe my age, maybe a little younger. Hard to tell in flashlight light. She looked tired in the way people look tired when they've been polite for too long. Wait, she said. You're Liv from Grave Doubts. I smiled. Park Dad said, Doubts or no doubts, you need to leave. The woman ignored him. You can't go in there tonight. I'm not trying to be a problem. Park Dad said, You are literally a problem. Fair. The woman lowered her flashlight so it wasn't in my eyes. People are dead. The sheriff asked us to close this road. We don't know what did it. Could be a person, could be an animal, could be some idiot with a machete hiding out there. We don't know. A bear doesn't usually use a machete, I said. Park Dad stared at me. The woman looked at me for a second. Aren't you scared? I almost answered honestly. Yes, obviously yes. But scared doesn't mean what people think it means. Scared doesn't always make you run. Sometimes scared makes you very, very focused. So I shrugged. I do this kind of thing. That's not really an answer. No, I said. She sighed. Please just go home. That almost worked, because she said it like a person, not like an order. But I couldn't just go home. I was going to be gone for a whole week after this, so tonight was it. So I turned the car around like a normal adult. I even gave them a little wave. Then I drove half a mile back, parked in a muddy little clearing, and walked into the trees. Yes, I understand how dumb that was. I understood it then, too. I had no choice. I had my phone, my flashlight, my camera, pepper spray, and that little cloth pouch in my jacket pocket. To be honest, the pouch was the reason I was really there. Lucent Lake wasn't random for me. I had been there before, years ago, with Daniel. Daniel was my husband. Ex-husband. Daniel's dead now. People get very soft when I say that. They do the, oh, you poor thing, face. Truth is, when Daniel died, grief wasn't what I felt first. It was relief. I'm not going to give you a list of what he did or didn't do. I hate when people want examples. Like they know anything or could be the judge of anything. Like whether I'm allowed to hate him or not. I'll say this much. My kids knew the sound of his car. The second he drove in, the whole house stopped breathing. And leaving him did not fix it. Most people love saying, "At least you got out." Like sick men respect locks, school pickup schedules, changed phone numbers, court orders, any of it. Daniel didn't, of course. Calling, waiting, showing up, finding reasons, making sure the kids and I understood that out was not the same thing as free. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep living like that. Every window was a threat, every phone call, every car slowing near the house. Enough. So I went to a woman a friend knew. She lived above a dentist. She wore sweatpants. Her tea was terrible, and I wasn't completely sure it was just tea. She listened, then said, "You need closure." I said, "I want him to get what he deserves and out of our life." She said, "Those are not always the same thing." I remember that very clearly. She said, "If it's closure, it closes. If it isn't, it just keeps bleeding." I thought, lady, I have 2 kids and a man who won't stop circling my life. I don't have time for fortune cookie stuff. So I said, "I want him gone." She gave me the strange smelling white powder and words. A week later, Daniel drove into a tree in the rain so hard they had to identify him by his teeth. Coincidence, maybe. I told myself that for a whole year. Now I have this feeling about Lucent Lake. So I went. The trail was dark but not weird. Just woods, leaves, mud, branches catching on my sleeves. I moved slowly because I kept my flashlight off most of the time. Last thing I needed was someone spotting me and dragging me back again. Then I heard my name. Not a whisper exactly, just very quiet. Quiet enough that, for a second, I thought I'd made it up. Then it came again. "Liv." I stopped. It sounded like his voice. My first thought was very stupid. It was, no thank you. Like I could unsubscribe. "Liv." My hand closed around the pouch in my pocket. Then someone grabbed my arm. I made a noise I will not be describing because I have some pride left. It was Park, Dad. "Are you serious?" he said. "Don't grab me. Then don't sneak past a roadblock." I was leaving. "You're walking toward the lake." I got turned around. He just looked at me. "Fine," I said. "Bad lie." He took his radio. "Found her. South Trail. Yeah, I've got her." Then he looked at me again. "This isn't some stupid internet social media. You get that, right?" "I know." "I don't think you do. People are dead." I said I know. And I did know. Better than he did, probably. He still had my sleeve. Then his expression changed. Not scared. Confused. He looked down at his chest. His jacket opened. Just opened. A red line opened across him, and then blood hit my face. Too much of it. He made this small sound, like he was embarrassed. Another cut opened under his jaw. I stepped back. He reached toward me, maybe for help, maybe because people do weird things when they're dying. Then his face came apart. There was nothing there. No bear, no man, no shape in the air. Nothing. Park Dad dropped, and his flashlight rolled into the leaves. I ran. Not away from the lake. I know. Believe me, I know. But Daniel's voice came again from ahead, and in that moment it made sense. I didn't want to leave what was left of Park Dad there, but I couldn't stay. That was Daniel all over. Hurt someone else and somehow make it my fault. I reached the lake out of breath and tasting and spitting someone else's blood. The water was black. The dock was still half collapsed. He was standing in the water, where the lake met the mud. Daniel. He didn't look like a person, a human. No, his clothes were wet and dark. His face seemed intact, but his skin looked wrong. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. But it was him. I felt chills prickling all over my body when I saw that smile. That stupid, patient smile he wore when he knew everyone in the house was afraid of what he might do next. I pulled out the pouch. My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped it. He stepped toward me. "Stay there," I said. He didn't. Of course he didn't. I thought of Donnie and Ben, my kids, not in some soft, glowing way. I thought of the real things, how long it took them to make noise in the house after he died, how fast they still say sorry, how Donnie still watches doors when people argue. He kept coming. "Why are you here? Why are you back? Get away from me, Daniel. Get away." I untied the pouch with my teeth. That was when he slowed, then stopped. He muttered something. I froze for half a second. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to understand it. I threw the powder in his face and said the words. Nothing happened. For a moment I thought, great, this is it. The thing that looked like Daniel is going to kill me by a lake, and tomorrow I'll be a sad little social media post people skim over at lunch. Then Daniel folded inward. I don't know how else to say it. He collapsed into himself. Shoulders caving, face sinking, mouth open. No sound. His whole body shrank into this dark, wet lump in the water, then thinned out into a oily stain floating there. I stood there waiting. I didn't want to move, or I couldn't. I didn't feel relief. Maybe I was still in shock. The lake was quiet, no slashing, no whispering. I actually said, "Okay," out loud, like I'd finished paying a bill or something. I suddenly had this strong urge to just go home, really badly. Then I heard crying. The woman ranger came through the trees with her gun out, both hands shaking. "Where's Tom?" she said. I raised my hands. "Don't shoot." "Where is he?" "I'm sorry." "What? Where is he?" "He's dead." She looked at the blood on me. "What did you do?" "I didn't. Listen, there was something here. I stopped it. I think I stopped it." "You think?" "I know. I know how that sounds." "Get on your knees." "Okay." I started to kneel. Then she flinched. A cut opened on her cheek. I froze. Another cut opened across her jacket. "No," I said. She looked at me. Not behind me, not into the trees. At me. Then her throat opened. She dropped into the leaves. The forest went quiet again. I got up and started running like hell. I didn't look back. I think I fell several times, but just kept going, ignoring all the pain in my legs and hands and face. I got in the car and drove like mad until I hit the main road back to town. Then I had this weird feeling. Chills from my forehead to my shoulders and down my spine. I don't know why, but I remembered what the powder woman told me. If it isn't closure, it keeps bleeding. I realized that this thing out there, this invisible thing, is not anyone else's. It's mine. It's the opposite of closure. It had dragged me back there because it knew I'd come. It knew I wasn't going there to forgive him, or let go, or any of that clean, pretty BS people say when they've never had to go through what I did, what the kids did. And I knew I was right because the second I thought it, I felt something for it. I knew it wouldn't hurt me. Not me. I'm home now. I desperately need a shower. It's 3 in the morning. My kids are at my sister's. I lied and said my flight was tonight. It's here with me. I know it is. There are scratches on the inside of my front door. They weren't there before, and that's the part I can't handle. Not that it followed me, that it thinks it's helping. Then someone screamed outside. A real scream, short and wet and cut off too fast. It sounded like Jerry, the old guy next door, the one who watches me from his porch when I'm sunbathing in the yard, and sprays neighborhood kids with his hose if they get too close to his grass. Oh, God. I go out to the cliffs, like I have every Wednesday for the past 10 years. The gravel crunches under my boots, the wind catching my hair with rough fingers. I keep pulling strands out of my mouth as I climb, my thighs aching. The path up to the top of the cliffs was steep when I was 16, and every year it's felt steeper. People ask me sometimes why I bother to keep coming out like this, when my legs don't show any sign of getting better. But it's worth it for the vantage point. There's a few signs up at the top warning people to stay away from the very edge of the rocks. There's even a picnic table, although it's weathered and worn from lack of use. No one comes here anymore. Not since the boat started to come. I don't need to go right to the edge of the cliffs to see it. I lean my cane against the table. I need it less when I'm not actively climbing, and wander out towards the edge. The water is gunmetal blue, dark and deep as sleep. The waves are a steady rhythmic roar. The ocean's voice is strong. Not one day that I've been coming out to the cliffs has it faltered. Even if waves are quieter when I come, it's like a great cat curled up and resting between hunts. Don't for a moment think that I am any safer than I was before. The water whispers as it laps against the rocks. Don't for a moment think that I can't reach you where you are. As I walk to a safe vantage point, a horn echoes out across the water. I flinch. I can't help it. From this distance, the boat is a tiny thing, just a speck on the horizon. I reach out, pinching it between my fingers, pretending that I can pluck it from the sea like a tick. I know what I would see if I was closer. It looks like a remarkably normal ferry boat, in most respects. There's no smoke coming from the smokestack, though. When it gets close, you can't see the crew. If it gets really close, you can see the wheels turning and the lines being pulled without anyone there to pull them. This far, I can't see any of the detail. I can only see the shape of the ship itself as it comes slowly, inexorably closer. They don't know where it comes from. Ironically, that's one of the main things that people do know about it. Whenever anyone new to town asks about it, that's the first thing that they're always told. It appeared on a Friday evening 10 years ago. School had just ended for the year, and my friends and I were celebrating. If you ask our parents, we were all collected over at Mollett's house for a sleepover, eating wat made by her mother, and cramming our mouths full of junk food and junkier movies before passing out in a comfortable haze of good food and the warm feeling of accomplishment at another year closed out. And we had done that. I could still taste the onion on the back of my tongue, mingling with the bright, prickly taste of the malic acid-coated candy that Ryan had brought by the bucketful. But we were 16 and 17, old enough to consider ourselves basically grown adults, and Mollett's parents were basically convinced by now that the lot of us were too lame to do anything exciting like drugs or have sex, which was true for the first one, and unfortunately not true for the latter one. It turns out boring people also have sex, just, boring sex. So they didn't mind if she went with us, and the beach was close enough that I could walk there without too much pain or discomfort. Not no pain. It was never no pain, not even then. But I'd already learned even back then that if I wanted to participate in life at all, I was going to need to learn to hurt. There was only so long that you could watch movies, and when the credits rolled someone made the suggestion. One thing led to another, and we were shoving on jackets and fishing phones out of the couch cushions, and making our way out into the cold night, on the path down towards the sea. I don't remember the walk there that well, nor our time on the beach before it came. It comes back to me in snatches and flashes. Mollett's bright laugh, like golden bubbles bursting in the night, my lungs aching from the cold, my hair tossed about by the wind, Sparrow winding it around their fingers, the fire Ryan built crackling, sparks drifting up like tiny stars in the night, the rough texture of Sparrow's denim jacket against my cheek, their body warm against mine. I wish I remembered it more. Even a scant decade later, the memories are hard to touch. They're all collapsed, down into salt and sea foam. I was curled up against Sparrow's chest, listening to Mallet and Ryan tease each other as they roasted marshmallows that we'd nicked from the snack cabinet back at Mallet's house. I was half asleep, full of sugar and roasted meat and alcohol that we definitely weren't supposed to have. Sparrow was idly petting my hair as they watched the fire, occasionally chiming in with the other two. I felt warm, like I was swathed in a thick blanket. The firelight made a soft orange bubble against the night. I remember that still, how it felt like nothing could touch me. I don't remember the joke that Mallet made. I wish I did. I remember so little about it now. Mallet said something, and Ryan laughed. His voice was starting to level out, the cracks getting fewer and fewer as his voice smoothed down into its adult shape. He had a scraggly beard, one that he used to run oil through every morning in the hopes of getting it to grow faster. He was laughing, and then the sound of the foghorn cut through the night. I remember the strange violence of it, the way my bubble popped around me, the night stretching its hands into our little cocoon. I sat up straight, startled out of the half-dreaming haze I'd been drifting in. Mallet had dropped the cooking fork, the tip in the fire. Her marshmallow started to smoke and char black, but she didn't notice. She was staring down the beach, towards the waves. "What the?" Sparrow said out loud. Their head was turned away from the fire, looking out into the night. Mallet pointed. Ryan turned to look. And I turned, following their gazes. I couldn't identify what the shape they were looking at was. It was too dark, and at first, all it looked like was a dark shape against the night, blocking out the light of the stars in the city. There were no lights on it, to help resolve it into something that made sense. Then the horn sounded again, and I realized it was a boat. A boat, aground at a beach with no dock, with no lights. I couldn't even see a red or a green light to tell me what side of the boat I was looking at. "We should go." I had never heard Ryan sound that nervous before. His voice wasn't shaking, it was just quiet, steady and quiet, like a hand gripping the back of your neck. It was that had me struggling to my feet, Sparrow helping me to my feet with a strong hand. They bent down, picking up my cane to hand to me. Mallet started throwing sand on the fire, stamping out the embers. I should say that despite all being 16 and 17, we didn't try to explore the boat. We didn't go closer. We didn't shout out, calling out to the sailors we thought had to be there. We didn't try to explore. We didn't antagonize. We didn't linger. We didn't. We didn't. I can look back 10 years later and regret that we didn't run immediately. I think at the time I'd thought that it might be an organized crime thing, or something. A silly thought of a teenager who'd hardly seen a gun in real life. But what would you have thought? A boat aground at a beach with no lights, totally eerie and quiet, miles away from the docks. I thought as long as we didn't see people, we would have time to collect our stuff and move away. I thought we had time to get away. What would you have thought? We collected our stuff the fastest we'd ever had. We didn't speak. Sparrow threw our food in a bag. Ryan grabbed Mallet's coat, throwing it on her shoulders. We left the beer. We shouldn't have, but we were 17 and scared. What would you have done? Silently, we picked up our things, pulled on our coats, and slipped away down the beach. We walked in tense silence, resisting the urge to look behind us. Sparrow helped support me without being asked, letting me lean against them, helping me find my footing. I was slower. The sand made me even more unsteady on my feet. I could feel Mallet's anxiety and frustration. She kept glancing back at me. My face felt hot. If you've ever been the most disabled person in a group, you might not know the prickling shame of it. Even if the people you're around don't say anything, it clings around the edges anyway, sticking to you like burrs to a coat. I clung to Sparrow, focused on ignoring the pain and keeping my footing. I was looking down at the sand, trying to make sure I didn't step on a rock and turn my foot. When I heard Ryan stop, I looked up and froze. For a moment, I thought we'd been turned around. It was impossible, but it was the explanation that best preserved reality as I knew it. Then my heart sank down to my stomach. I felt like the world tilted around me. It was coming home to find your house occupied by strangers. The boat was in front of us, dark shadow against the stars. I could feel Sparrow go tense against me. Mallet took a step back. Ryan stood frozen. Then as one, we turned, dropped our stuff, and started running. I ran. My legs screamed immediately. I didn't run as a matter of course. Walking took enough effort. But the cold, freezing fear in my chest was enough to prompt a sprint. Sparrow's hand was tight on mine. They were on the track and field team, and could easily outpace me, but they stayed behind, hand tight on mine like a vice as they tugged me forward. I don't think any of us had fomented anything approaching a plan. Sometimes the only thing you can think to do is run. If I'd known then what was about to happen, perhaps I would have. But then, that's always what you tell yourself, isn't it? We had turned and ran back down the beach, the way we had come. I remember looking up and seeing that the boat was gone, and feeling a weird flare of hope. I could see the bright sparks of the city lights outlined against the sky. There was a path somewhere among the ice plants and the sand that would lead back to the asphalt and streetlights. I had a thought somewhere in the back of my mind that surely that would mean safety. I didn't know what was happening, the way I would later. I just knew that something was terribly wrong, and the only thing to do was to be as far away from it as possible. Mallet and Ryan were running in front of us. I could barely see through the white flares of pain in my legs. I was going to fall, I realized. A kind of awful fatalism, I remember later. Adrenaline only goes so far. There's a point where it falls. My brain was full of a white, sticky fog. Pain has a way of driving out all other concerns. It's hard for me to describe what happened next. What happened and what was a product of pain and fear is hard to tell 10 years later. It looks like this in my memory. We were running, and I could almost see the gap in the ice plants where the pathway started when the foghorn sounded again. It was worse this time. If you've never heard a normal foghorn, they carry like no other sound in the world, like the bellow of some great undersea beast. When this sound went off, I couldn't help but think, somewhere through the haze of pain, that it sounded like a scream, an open mouth. It was followed immediately by another one, and this time my legs collapsed underneath me. I couldn't help it. It was past willpower and adrenaline, and down to the very mechanical limits of my joints. The limits of the pain my brain would tolerate. Sometimes your body will just not let you hurt any longer. As soon as I did, my hand slipped away from Sparrow's. They hadn't been expecting me to fall, and they weren't ready for it. I fell, collapsing down into the sand. The sound came again, and this time it was somehow louder. It filled the entire world. I curled up into a ball, covering my ears, which didn't at all manage to block anything out. I think I screamed. When the sound died down enough for me to open my eyes and look up, I saw a tableau that I can't forget. When I close my eyes, I still can see it. I see it when I sleep. The boat had returned, as impossible as that was. Like a tiger circling its prey. It was closer than it was before. It seemed larger than it had before. It loomed like a wall of darkness. The water was wrong. Near it. I don't know why I remember that. I think that sometimes your brain just grabs onto details. The water wasn't lapping against it like it would against a normal ship. It was just coming in gentle waves against the shore, unaffected by the presence of the boat at all. Mallet was the closest to the boat. I didn't see Ryan. I watched her walk towards the boat. I think I tried to call out towards her, but the horn sounded again and my voice was swallowed by the boom. She walked towards the boat. She didn't look back towards me. I turned that part over in my mind over and over again. She walked towards the boat and didn't look back. She walked towards the boat and then, like I said, I was half out of my mind with pain and fear. It's hard to tell what's real and what isn't. I can only tell you what I saw. She walked forward, towards the boat, and it looked like the darkness opened up. I saw something. A rope? I couldn't see. Curl around her hands. She didn't resist it. She walked forward into the darkness and was gone. Sparrow was closer to me. They were standing, staring at the boat. I watched them sway gently on their feet. They took a step forward, like they were going to follow Mallet into the dark. I made a sound that I'd never made before, some kind of wounded animal cry. I crawled forward. Sparrow! Sparrow! Sparrow turned. There was something strange about their expression. Something hollow and empty, like a doll. I reached out a hand towards them. Sparrow, please. To my immense relief, Sparrow came towards me. I couldn't stand on my own, even trying to lift myself up sent spikes through my flesh. They reached down, helping me to my feet. I buried my face into their neck and breathed for a second. Let's go, please. I hardly knew what I was saying. Sparrow didn't say anything. They just braced their grip on me and started walking towards the ship. What? It came out in a breathless little whisper. My lungs didn't seem like they wanted to work. They took another step forwards. I looked at their face, but their eyes didn't seem to want to focus on mine. Their eyes were dark. They were focused intently on the boat beyond. Sparrow, what? It's okay. I knew as soon as they spoke that something was unimaginably, awfully wrong. Sparrow didn't talk like that. Their voice was supposed to be high, fast, and sharp. They talked faster than they could get the words actually out coherently most of the time. They didn't talk like this, soft, empty, and slow. It's okay. Their skin was so cold against mine. We'll be there in just a moment. I tried to stop, pulling away. No, we need the street, Sparrow. We need... Don't you want to see it? They stopped, but they didn't turn away from the boat. Their grip was still strong on me. This time they looked down, and I had the awful feeling they were still somehow looking through me. Their faint smile was like no expression I'd ever seen on their face before. What? It's here for us, Sparrow said, with that same empty smile. They watch us, down in the deep below. They watch us with their eyes that aren't eyes down in the deep dark below the water. And they're tired of waiting. They have space for us down in the dark below the water, below the ocean's floor. Don't you want to see? No. I yanked away hard enough to slip out of Sparrow's grasp. I hit the sand and my vision went white with pain. When it had receded enough for me to understand anything again, Sparrow was standing in front of me. I flinched, but they didn't grab for me. They leaned down, pressing a soft kiss against my forehead, before they stood up, smiling that awful smile that wasn't theirs. Just look, they said, in that same dreamy, dead, dull voice. Just look. Can't you see? I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But as they turned away and started to walk towards the ship, swaying slightly as they moved like they were drunk, I glanced down towards the dark wall of the ship as well. The darkness was different somehow now. Instead of just being empty darkness, it seemed to ripple like water. It rippled and distorted, and for some reason, despite an alarm starting to go off in the back of my brain, I couldn't make myself look away. In the darkness, I saw something moving. I wish I could describe to you what I saw. I wish I could make it make sense to someone who hadn't seen it. Any description I come up with seems to pale in comparison. In the darkness, I saw something look back at me. I saw eyes, but they were not eyes. Eyes didn't move like that. They were not eyes, but they could see. They could see inside me. And they promised me things. They promised me darkness. That they had a space for me. There was a place below the waves. Below the water. Below the bottom of the ocean that was open for me. Humans couldn't live down there, but they promised me that I would live. They promised me that I would live forever. It was my legs that saved me in the end. As Sparrow disappeared, I tried to struggle forward, towards the welcoming, waiting dark, and ran up against my legs. I tried to brace some weight on my knee, and the resultant pain was like a white fire. There was no room for darkness or eyes when I hurt like that. I tried again, and that time, I think I fully lost consciousness for a moment. My ears were ringing. As soon as I could move or think again, I rolled over and threw up. When I looked up, the boat was gone. And that was that. What else was I supposed to do? I sat on the beach until the sun had started to turn the sky gray and pale and streak the horizon with orange and yellow. And then I got up and limped home. It took hours longer than it was supposed to. Somewhere in the chaos I'd lost my cane and never did find it again. I made do with a bad one from Walgreens for a while after that. I found out later that we hadn't been the only ones to see the boat. That should have been impossible, of course, but we were beyond that now. I didn't understand the world that I lived in anymore. Why shouldn't a ship have visited hundreds of people around the city in a single night? It was no more impossible than anything else I'd seen. There was chaos, I think. I didn't see much of it. I didn't leave my bedroom for a while after that. Instead, I slept through most of the summer, putting my phone on Do Not Disturb so I couldn't be bothered by the masses of texts and news articles discussing the mass disappearance. It all seemed so distant, so unreal. I knew what had happened. I knew where everyone was. I knew at the bottom of the sea beneath the sand and coral was something hungry and old and waiting. Everything else was just so much theater and pageantry compared to that. I kept seeing the boat whenever I slept. It wasn't all the same dream. I could be in the city, or swimming in the sea, or walking on the beach. Wherever it was, at some point, I would look up at the sky and there it would be, a dark shadow against the blue sky. I would see it, and then I would feel it again, the touch of strange eyes and the opening of an abyss beneath me. I never told my parents about it. How could I? It wasn't the sort of thing that you could tell your parents. They wouldn't have understood. They wouldn't have understood what I meant when I said that they were still waiting for me. Their eyes were still on me. They still had a space for me beneath the waves. They were still watching me. I suppose it was fair that I watched them back. I turned away from the sea, beginning to walk back towards the pathway down to the parking lot. I don't need to stay now that I've laid eyes on it. It's not like it's going to move quickly. My phone rings. I fish it out of my pocket with one hand, unlocking it and holding it up to my ear. Hello? Sunshine. The voice is warm and gentle. How are you? I soften despite myself, even though I have to focus on still picking my way down the sand and rocks. Hi, Dad. Yeah, I'm okay. It's just my father and me these days. I'm long grown, but I still live at home. With my legs being what they are, and my father's age being what it is, we do a lot better supporting each other. Home aids cost money that neither of us have. We're not as close as we were before everything, but we help each other out. It's a living. When my father speaks again, he sounds concerned. He doesn't like when I leave without telling him at least that I'm leaving, and when I'll be back, even if he's never even tried to prevent me from going wherever I want. It's not that he's a helicopter parent. He's just scared. I can't really blame him. No one in town likes their people being out of sight these days. Where did you go? Just out to the cliff. I'm heading back now. He tries to not sound disturbed, but he does. And did you see it? I nod before remembering that he can't see me. Yeah, it's miles out though. Should be months at least before it gets here. We have enough warning to prepare at least. You know, I don't like that you go out there, he says. This time his voice is gentle, like someone speaking to a frightened animal or a child. I bristle, despite myself. It's fine, Dad. Nothing's going to happen to me. It can't do anything at that distance. It needs you to be able to see it better for that. It's still a risk. he says. What if it calls you while you're all the way up there? You'd fall all the way into the sea. I don't know how to tell him that he's wrong. He knows I got close to it, closer than most people have, but he doesn't know that I was there. I was there and I watched my friends be swallowed. People think it just wants to drown those who it takes. There's not many people who have gotten as close to it as I have, and even fewer who have watched the things that I have seen. I wish that all it wanted to do was drown me. A clean death compared to it and what it wants. People have gone out to try and film it, capture it, bomb it. They don't come back. It makes me feel better to monitor it, I say finally. I like knowing where it is. Okay, he says finally. Just come home soon. It's the first night tonight. Okay, is all I can say. I'll be back soon. I'm finally back to my car. I set my cane on the empty passenger seat and pull out. Home is a lot more empty than it used to be when I was a kid. Downtown is full of dilapidated buildings and empty windows with signs advertising leases in them. There are walls where you can still see where the letters were pried off from the sign, discolored shapes from the sun. Other signs are bleached with sun and wind until you can hardly see what used to be there. Years on, I can't quite remember. Was that an ice cream store or a seafood restaurant? Was that a bookstore or an art studio? There are more homeless folks than there used to be as well. I see people sleeping under overhangs or beneath bridges. There are more encampments than there used to be as well. I pass one as I drive down the back road to my house. This one has been there long enough that they found some fencing from somewhere to encircle their tents with. There are a few gaps in the barrier, presumably for fleeing at speed if they need to. There's already someone outside, a tall woman with skin darker than mine and a bright pink shirt. She catches my eye as I drive by, but doesn't try to interact with me. It still makes a distressed twist go through my stomach. It's not safe to be homeless here these days. I guess I don't know if it ever was. I wonder as I drive if she's going to survive the night. It's night one, which means that everyone's in danger, but especially someone without a house, without doors to lock and hide behind. The city's done their own rituals since about year 2, when it became obvious that this was going to happen and keep happening, unless someone did something about it. I don't know all the details behind it. As I've heard it, they got someone from the university, marine biologists, oceanographers, folklorists, even some sailors from the local historical tall ship, and threw everyone in a room together until someone came up with an idea for what to do about the ferry boat. They do the ritual 3 times a year. 3s are important or something. It's a big ceremony for the town. They have hot dog vendors and everything. My father goes sometimes, but I don't. I'm pretty sure it doesn't do anything. Whatever I saw down there in the deep dark down below doesn't care about the little rituals with salt and gorse and sea champion. And then there's the rituals that other people do. Don't be surprised that someone came up with it. Wouldn't it have occurred to you at least? It takes people. It hollows them out of everything but salt water and shadow and drives them down to the darkness beneath. It wants people. For whatever reason. I have no idea why. I don't know who it was who first thought of it, but it's a kind of thing that people do. It wants people. Let's give them the people we don't want in the first place. I don't know anyone who for sure has taken part in the unofficial side of Night 1. I've never heard of anyone getting convicted for it either. Once you fall into the cracks, people don't put that much energy into looking for you and bringing you justice either. Perhaps you think I should help them. Perhaps I should. What would you do? My house is small. We downsized after my mother was lost. I don't think either of us could bear existing in the rooms where she had once walked anymore. It's small and green, and after I park, I walk in past my father's tiny vegetable garden. Tiny, still green tomatoes curl up steel wires towards the slowly fading sun. My father is sitting in the living room as I enter and lock the door behind me. Father has a charm hanging up by the door. I eye the little bundle of sticks and dried mallow, and sea aster. I don't say anything. Hey, sweet pea, he says. His eyes are hollow, but the ordinary hollow of exhaustion. My father hates night one. I think I do somewhere, but I haven't felt anything very strongly for a long time. Hey, Dad. I lean over and press a kiss to the top of his forehead. Staying up? I've got all the windows and doors locked and warded, he says for answer, but you should go double check for me. My legs ache. I want nothing more than to sit. I go check anyway, like it has been every time for nearly a decade. It's perfect. When I go back, I sit down on the couch next to him, like I'm a child again. I curl into his side. Dad wraps an arm around me the way he always does. His skin is cooler than it used to be, but it's the ordinary cool of age. I still compare everything to Sparrow. I don't know if I'll ever stop. He's watching the newscast from the ceremony. I lean my head against his shoulder. Watching it again? He sighs. I don't know what I think I'm going to see. I shrug. Do you think it does anything? Sure, I say. Maybe. He accepts this answer and ruffles my hair gently before rising. I know he's going to triple check. Some nights he ends up quadruple and quintuple checking again and again until I make him some tea and make him sit down. He's a lot quieter than he is in my memories. The sea ate his smiles as well. The sea ate the heart out of the city. I think and sigh, and then pick up the remote and turn off the news. It's not until last night, when I'm laying in bed, that I let myself think what I really think the answer is. I don't think any of the rituals that we do work. Sometimes I meet people who think the violence that is done at the shoreline to those no one in the city cares about is worth it, if it keeps the sharks away from their door. I don't know how to tell them that I'm pretty sure it can't do anything. I have charms in my room as well. I've had them for years. It makes Dad feel better to make them. There are bundles and bundles lining the walls and shelves of my room. Bundles of rowan and aster and gorse and sea campion and seaweed. Dad trying different things over the years. Trying to find something that works. I have years worth of them, and not one of them has ever stopped me from feeling their eyes that are not eyes on me. I can feel them now. As I lay in bed and there's nothing else to distract me, they are watching me still, behind the walls and sideways of the sea. I feel their gaze like a thin line that stretches from my bedroom all the miles away to where the ferry boat moves slowly, day by day, closer. I wonder if Sparrow and Ryan and Mallet can see me wherever they are. I wish I could believe that the rituals people do work. I wish I couldn't say this about myself, but I know that if it worked, I probably would be okay with giving people to the sea. But I lay there in bed and I feel it. I feel that same sense of pageantry and theater that I did that summer 10 years ago. The sense that everything we built is nothing but paint and foil and cardboard. It's a play that we do because it makes us feel better. Nothing more. Whatever I saw in the darkness that night isn't something that cares about salt water and flowers. If it's giving us space, giving us time to rest and recover, it's not because of anything that we're doing. It's because it wants to. It knows that there's so many of us that cannot leave. It knows that even if 1 year's pickings are slim, that it has time. Whatever has waited there for uncounted eons beneath the waves isn't something that needs to worry about time. I close my eyes, trying to ignore the sense of eyes on me. It can wait, I think to myself. It can wait as long as it takes to catch someone who it wants. I wish I knew what to do. Perhaps somewhere else. I'd be able to figure out how to get my friends back, how to drive the boat away forever, how to stop feeling the aching absence within my chest that I know is the space that they've prepared me for, still waiting for me to fill it. I don't. All I know how to do is lay in bed and close my eyes, knowing that when I sleep, I will once again see the yawning gaze of the eyes beneath the sea. My therapist wants me to write it down. She's been patient about it, more patient than I deserve, but last week she said that sometimes the story needs somewhere to live outside of you, and that maybe I should find it a place. I don't think she means Reddit, but I've tried talking about it, and I've tried writing it in a journal that sits on my nightstand, and I've tried just letting it be quiet inside me, and none of that has worked, so here we are. I want to be clear about something before we start. The police have everything. Once I could write it down, I wrote it down, and they have all of it. This isn't about that. This is for me, and maybe for my therapist, if she ever goes looking. My name is Frank. I have a stutter. I've had it since I was 5 years old, and I will probably have it until I die. And for most of my life, I have treated that fact like a verdict. Like something a jury handed down about who I am and what I'm worth. I know that's not healthy. My therapist has a lot to say about it, but knowing something isn't healthy and being able to stop doing it are two different things. And anyone who stutters will tell you the same. Rob and Stephanie were the first friends I'd had who just waited. Not in a performative, look how patient I am way. They just waited. The way you wait for a sentence to finish. Because that's what it was. A sentence finishing. They'd been my people since sophomore year, and on the Friday this happened, we had a plan. I was going to get dropped home, tell my dad I was going to Rob's for the weekend, pack a bag, and be back out the door before anything could go wrong. Rob had a new game. Stephanie was already there. It was the kind of plan that felt airtight at 16. There was one problem. I'd gotten a C- on my chemistry exam that morning, and my dad hadn't seen it yet. It wasn't a catastrophic grade. My dad wasn't a catastrophic man, but he cared about school in the specific, tired way that parents who worked hard and didn't go to college care about school. And I knew that if he saw it before I left, the weekend would become a conversation, and the conversation would become a negotiation. And I'd end up at home all weekend, staring at a chemistry textbook while Rob and Stephanie sent me screenshots of the game without me. So I was nervous. That's the context. I was a 16-year-old kid, nervous about a bad grade, which is the most ordinary thing in the world, and I want you to hold on to that because everything that comes after is easier to understand if you remember that's where I started. Rob pressed something into my palm before I left their house. Small, white. Cyclobenzaprine, he said. Like he'd practiced the word. My mom's, for her back. It just takes the edge off, Frank. You'll stop clenching. Stephanie was leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed, watching me look at it. You've been wound up since third period, she said. Just take it. It's not a big deal. I looked at the pill for a moment, then I put it on my tongue. Picked up my bag, and at the door turned back. I'll see you guys tomorrow, I said. Rob pointed at me. Text when you're on your way. I nodded and went to meet my dad. He had the radio on low. Country, which I didn't love. But I'd learned to think of it as his music the same way he'd learned to think of my silence as normal. We pulled out of Rob's neighborhood, and the streetlights started coming, one after another, sliding across the windshield in a rhythm that was almost nice. And I noticed something. I felt easy, not tired, not foggy, just easy. Like someone had turned down a dial I'd forgotten was always turned up. The tight thing I carried in my chest and my throat and my jaw, the thing I'd stopped noticing because it was always there, was quieter than usual. I took a breath just to feel how far down it went. My dad asked about Rob's mom, whether her back was better. I told him I thought so. He asked if Stephanie was the girl from the soccer team, and I said no. Different Stephanie. And he nodded like he was filing that away. Then he asked what we were planning to do all weekend, and I said we were going to play video games mostly. And he made the face he always made about video games. And I said Rob just got this new one. It's supposed to have a really good story. Apparently it won a bunch of awards. And I heard myself say the whole sentence and I realized I hadn't blocked once. My dad glanced over at me. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me for a second with this expression I didn't have a name for. Something quiet and sideways. Almost a grin, but smaller than that. Then he looked back at the road. I know what it was now. It was just a father watching his kid talk. Easy and unguarded, and being glad about it. At the time, I felt something shift in my chest. Not pride exactly, more like relief. That I had been given a glimpse of something I didn't usually get to have, and I looked out the window and let myself feel it without analyzing it. We were almost home. The chemistry exam sat in my backpack and I thought about it distantly, the way you think about something you've decided not to deal with yet. He hadn't asked. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe we'd just have this. The radio and the streetlights and that small moment, and I'd be at Rob's by 9. Those friends of yours, my dad said. He tapped his fingers on the wheel once. They good kids? Yeah, I said. They look out for me. He was quiet for a moment. Good, he said. That's good, Frank. He pulled up to the house. He reached for the door handle. The crash from inside was heavy enough that I felt it in my seat. My dad moved fast. Faster than I'd ever seen him move, already reaching for the knob before I'd fully processed the sound. I was still sitting there with my seatbelt when the door opened and the shots came. 3 of them. He dropped. I don't remember getting out of the car. I remember being on the porch. I remember the man inside looking at me with pure surprise. Not guilt. Just the surprise of someone who hadn't known there was a passenger. And then he was gone. Through the back somewhere. And it was just me and my dad and the porch light humming. I got down next to him. I pressed my hands against him the way you're supposed to. Or the way I thought you were supposed to. And I could feel warmth, and I didn't let myself think about what that meant. I just pressed down. His face was turned toward me, and his eyes were open, and I talked to him, or I tried to. I said his name and some other things I can't remember, and somewhere in there I had my phone out and I was dialing. 911, what is your emergency? I knew exactly what to say. I have always had the words. That is the thing about stuttering that I have never been able to make anyone understand. The words are right there. They are always right there. And there is something that stands between knowing them and saying them that has no name and no logic and no mercy. Hello, what is your emergency? I could feel my neck straining, the tendons pulling taut under my jaw, my chest locking up, every muscle involved in speech tightening around nothing while my hands kept pressing down. Kept pressing. My arms shaking from holding the position. Sir, I need you to tell me what's happening. My father. Sir, is someone there? Are you okay? The muscle relaxer was still in my system. I know that now. I've read enough about it since. The adrenaline was fighting it and losing in certain places and winning in others. And one of the places it was losing was my throat. My tongue. The muscles that were supposed to push words out into the air. My body was doing everything it could and my voice just wouldn't. I kept pressing my hands down. I kept trying. A neighbor called it in. Sirens came about 4 minutes later and I was still on the porch, phone to my ear. Hands where they were, still trying. Long past the point where I knew help was coming. I don't entirely know why. Maybe because stopping felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. Maybe because trying was the only thing left I could do for him, and I wasn't ready to stop doing it. They found us like that. I've been in therapy for 3 months. I've read about stuttering under stress, about muscle relaxers and adrenaline, about how none of what happened was my fault. My therapist's words, attributable to no failure on my part. I understand the argument, I can follow the logic, but I keep coming back to that car ride, how easy it felt. My dad's face when I finished that sentence without blocking, that small sideways thing that wasn't quite a smile, and I think about how I was sitting there in the warmth of it, quietly relieved about a chemistry exam, thinking maybe the weekend was going to be okay. He was going to find out about the grate eventually. I know that. We would have argued about it, or not argued. And either way, we would have gotten past it. There was time for all of that. There was supposed to be time. I started working the night shift at an old factory in 2019. The place shut down in 1991. Nobody ever explained why. Some company still owns the land and they pay me to walk the perimeter, check the locks on the gates, and sit in the security hut until sunrise. The money is fine. The rules aren't written down anywhere. The guy I replaced told them to me on my first night. He made me repeat them back until I got every word right. Rule 1. Do not go onto the main floor after 2 a.m. Rule 2. If you hear the conveyor belt, count your steps. Keep counting until it stops. Rule 3. Do not look at the second shadow. I laughed when he finished. He didn't. For 2 years I followed the rules and nothing happened. The conveyor belt never moved. The power had been cut decades ago. The second shadow was just a trick of the emergency lights. At least that's what I told myself. Then they sent me a partner. His name was Ellis. Young guy, quiet, didn't ask any questions. I told him the rules on his first night. He rolled his eyes. Sure, he said. Anything else? No. He looks at me and asks, You actually believe this stuff? I believe you should follow it. That was the end of the conversation. The first week went smoothly. We split the grounds between us. He took the west side, I took the east. Every night before we separated, I'd remind him, Don't go on to the main floor after 2 a.m. Every night he'd wave me off. Yeah. On the 8th night, my watch stopped. I didn't notice until I checked the clock inside the hut. My watch read 1:47. The wall clock read 2:14. I radioed Ellis. No answer. I tried again. Nothing. The west gate was empty. The main floor entrance wasn't. The chain was lying on the ground, the padlock open. I broke Rule 1. I told myself I was only going in long enough to drag him back out. The factory floor stretched into darkness. Moonlight spilled through the high windows. The conveyor belt was moving. There was no sound, no motors, no grinding gears. But I could feel it through my boots, a slow vibration beneath the concrete, like a heartbeat. Ellis stood at the far end of the belt, facing the wall. His shoulders shook. I shouted his name. He turned. His face looked normal. His shadow didn't. It had 2 heads. I looked down. My own shadow was gone. For a second I couldn't move. Then I grabbed Ellis and ran. I counted every step. 31, 32. The vibration followed us. 33, 34, 35, 36, 37. The conveyor belt stopped. The silence hit so hard it felt physical. I slammed the door behind us and locked it. Ellis didn't say a word for the rest of the shift. The next night he remembered none of it. Not the belt, not the factory floor, not me dragging him outside. But something had changed. His shadow lagged behind him. Only half a second at most. Enough to notice, not enough to explain. I started noticing other things. The air in the hut tasted different after midnight. Metallic, like old coins. The lights flickered sometimes, not only in my peripheral vision. When I looked directly at them, they were steady. The floor of the west gate room was always warm, even in winter. No heat source, just warm. After that, the nights stopped behaving properly. Patrols that should take 20 minutes took 3 hours. The clocks never agreed. My phone showed different dates, depending on which room I checked it in. Sometimes the sun rose too early, sometimes it didn't rise at all. The sky would just go from black to gray and stay there. One night Ellis went to check the west gate alone. He was gone 5 minutes by his watch, 7 hours by mine. When he came back, he was crying. He said he'd walked the same hallway over and over. Every door led back to the same door. The only way out was to count his steps backward. He wouldn't tell me what was in the hallway. He just kept saying, "I don't know," over and over. I stopped sleeping, not because I wasn't tired, but because every time I closed my eyes, I dreamed about the conveyor belt. In the dream, it was silent, but I could feel it, and my feet were already counting. After that, the conveyor belt started moving more often. Sometimes we'd hear it while standing outside. Sometimes we'd hear it inside the hut. Whenever it started, we'd count. Neither of us questioned it anymore, especially Ellis. He followed the rules perfectly. He never looked at shadows, never approached the main floor, never missed a count. But his shadow kept growing. Every week it stretched farther. No matter where he stood, it pointed toward the main floor. I stopped looking at my own shadow. I don't know what it's doing anymore. I tried leaving. I took the company truck and drove down the access road. The road bent left, then left again, then left a third time. I passed the same rusted sign 3 times. I stopped the truck and turned around. The sign was still there, but the words weren't. "Welcome back." The letters looked wet. I drove back. I haven't tried leaving since. Now I'm sitting in the security hut writing this. Ellis sits across from me. The wall clock says 1:47. It has said 1:47 for 3 days. Neither of us mentions it. We just repeat the rules over and over. Our voices are hoarse. I can't remember the last time we drank anything. A few hours ago, a truck came down the access road. A young guy stepped out. Clipboard, badge, company uniform. He asked if this was the factory. Ellis looked at me, then back at him. "Yeah," he said. "You need to listen to the rules." The man smiled. "I wrote the rules." Then he walked past us towards the main floor. The conveyor belt started moving. I felt it through the floor of the hut. Ellis's shadow stretched across the room, past the door, past the wall, out of sight. The man never looked back. The conveyor belt stopped. The clock still said 1:47. Ellis turned toward me. His face was calm. Too calm. "That's the 4th one," he said. "The first 3 were me." Then he walked after the man. The door shut behind them. The padlock clicked closed on its own. The chain twisted itself into a knot. I've been trying to undo it ever since. My fingers are bleeding. The knot doesn't change. I'm alone now. The rules are still written on the wall. I don't remember writing them, but the handwriting is mine. There are 4 rules. I swear there used to be 3. Rule 1. It's forbidden to go onto the main floor after 2 a.m. Rule 2. If the conveyor belt is heard, count steps. Rule 3. It is forbidden to look at the second shadow. Rule 4. When the next one comes, do not speak. You are the new guy now. I just heard the truck engine start outside. Then stop. Then start again. Then stop. Footsteps on the gravel. Someone is coming up the path. We were 4 days into a week-long camping trip in the Chuska Mountains when Danny first heard it. I want to be clear about something before I get into this. Danny is not the kind of person who spooks easily. He grew up in rural New Mexico. He's been hunting since he was 9. He's the guy who stays calm when everyone else is panicking. The guy you want next to you when things go wrong. When Danny says something scared him, you listen. We were sitting around the fire. Me, Danny, his girlfriend Priya, and our friend Marcus, when Danny went quiet in the middle of a sentence. Just stopped talking and stared out past the tree line. "What?" Marcus said. "Did you hear that?" We listened. Wind in the pines, the fire crackling. Nothing else. "Hear what?" Priya said. Danny shook his head slowly. Probably nothing. But he didn't look like it was nothing. He looked like a man doing math in his head and not liking the answer. We were all in our late 20s. The trip was Marcus's idea. He'd been going through a rough divorce and needed to get out of the city, and we'd all agreed that a week off the grid was exactly what everyone needed. No cell service, no internet, nothing but mountains and trees and the kind of silence that cleans you out. The Chuskas sit on the Navajo Nation. Danny has Dinah ancestry on his mother's side, which is part of why he suggested the specific location. He knows the land. He respects it in a way that the rest of us, raised on concrete and convenience, don't entirely understand but try to follow his lead on. He had one rule when we arrived. Don't be loud after dark. Don't draw attention. We thought he meant bears. The second night was when I heard it. We'd gone to bed around 10. I was in the tent I was sharing with Marcus, almost asleep when it drifted in from somewhere out in the dark. A voice. Human. Distant. "Help me." I sat up. "Help me." I unzipped the tent before I'd fully thought it through. Danny was already outside, standing perfectly still, facing the trees. He'd clearly been awake. "Someone's out there," I said. "We have to." "No." His voice was flat, final. "Danny, someone is..." "Keep your voice down." He turned to look at me and his expression stopped me cold. I have known Danny for 11 years. I have never seen him look like that. "Get back in the tent. Don't make any noise. Don't use your flashlight. There's someone out there asking for help." "No," he said very quietly. "There isn't." I stood there for a moment listening. The voice came again from a slightly different direction than before. "Help me." Something was wrong with it. I couldn't name it at first. It was clearly a human voice. The right pitch, the right cadence, 2 recognizable English words. But there was something underneath it that made my spine go cold. Something about the way it landed, like a recording of the words rather than someone actually saying them. Like something that had heard the words and was producing the sounds without understanding what they meant. I got back in the tent. I didn't sleep. In the morning, Danny explained. Not everything. I don't think he was willing to say everything, but enough. He told us about the Yi Naldalushi, what outsiders call skinwalkers. He told us they were real, that his grandmother had told him about them since he was small, that there were things in these mountains that were not what they appeared to be. Marcus laughed. Not meanly, more nervously. "You're telling me a skinwalker was outside our camp last night?" "I'm telling you something was," Danny said. "And I'm telling you that if you had gone out there, it would have been very bad." "How do you know it wasn't just someone who needed help?" Danny looked at him for a long moment, because of what it was saying. He let that sit. Then he said, "These things, they learn sounds. They mimic what they hear. They're not like animals that learn calls. They specifically learn human sounds." He paused. "Think about what sounds a human makes when one of these things finds them." The fire popped. "Help me," Priya said quietly. She'd gone pale. Danny nodded. "That's what it knows. That's what it's heard, over and over for a long time." He looked out at the trees. "That's the only reason it says it." Nobody spoke for a while. Marcus, to his credit, did not laugh again. We should have left that morning. I want to be honest about that. We had enough information to make the right call and we didn't make it. And what happened next is partly on us for that reason. Danny wanted to go. Priya wanted to go. Marcus and I convinced them to stay. One more day, we said. We'd be careful. We'd be quiet. We wouldn't go out after dark. I think we both still hadn't fully accepted what Danny was telling us. Not really. It's one thing to hear something wrong in the dark and feel afraid. It's another thing in the daylight, with the fire going and coffee in your hand, to truly believe that something inhuman spent the night circling your camp. We stayed. The third night, it got closer. I know this because I could hear it moving, not in an animal way. Animals have a logic to how they move through underbrush, a pattern that makes sense. This was different. It would be still for a long time, and then it would be somewhere else, with no sound of transition, as though it had decided to be in a different place and simply was. Help me. Closer now, maybe 40 feet from the tent. Help me. 30. I was lying completely still with my eyes open in the dark, listening to Marcus breathe beside me, when I became aware of something that made every hair on my body stand up at once. The voice was coming from two directions. Not alternating, simultaneously. Two voices, identical, both sang the same words, slightly out of sync with each other. Help me. Help me. I grabbed Marcus's arm. He was already awake. Neither of us moved. It stayed outside the tent for what felt like an hour. Probably wasn't. Probably 15 minutes at most, but time moves differently when you are lying still in the dark, trying not to breathe too loud, listening to something that learned its only words from dying people circle your tent in the dark. Then it was gone. Not gradually, just gone. We left before dawn. Danny had us packed and moving while it was still dark, which felt wrong. I wanted light. I wanted to be able to see, but he said movement was safer than anything. He let us out with one small flashlight, keeping the beam low, and none of us spoke the entire 2-mile walk to the trailhead. We were almost to the cars when Priya grabbed Danny's arm. At the edge of the tree line, maybe 60 feet away, something was standing in the pre-dawn gray. It was tall. Too tall. The proportions were almost human, but not quite. The limbs a little too long, the head sitting at a slight angle on the neck, like something that had learned the shape of a person from a description rather than observation. It was still. It was watching us. Danny kept walking. Slow, steady. He didn't look at it directly. He said quietly, without turning his head, "Don't look at it. Don't stop walking. Get in the cars." I looked anyway. I wish I hadn't, because in the moment before I forced my eyes away, it moved. Not toward us, just shifted its weight. A small adjustment, and I heard it very softly from across the 60 feet of gray morning air. Help me. And the thing that will stay with me, the thing I can't stop thinking about even now, weeks later, safe in my apartment with the lights on, it sounded hopeful. Like something that had been saying those words for a very long time, to many people, in many situations, and had learned that the words worked, had learned that those words made people come closer. We've talked about it since, the four of us. Danny more than anyone. He told me something a few days after we got back, when we were alone, that he hadn't said in front of the others. He said his grandmother told him that the reason they learn those words, specifically those words, is because of frequency. They learn what they hear most often, and what they hear most often from humans, in the specific situations where they encounter humans, is a person at the end of their options. A person realizing in the last moments before the end that they need someone to come. Help me. He said his grandmother told him the worst part isn't that they say it. The worst part is that at some point in the very beginning, a very long time ago, one of them heard it for the first time and came closer to see what it meant, and learned. I don't go camping anymore. And sometimes late at night, when I'm most of the way asleep and the apartment is quiet, I think about that thing standing at the tree line in the gray morning light. I think about how still it was. I think about how long it must have been doing this. How many camps it had circled. How many people had heard those two words drift out of the dark and made the same mistake of going toward them. I think about how it sounded hopeful. And I turn on the lights, and I wait for morning.